Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grace and Truth Podcast. My name's Taylor Bacon, and I'm the Associate Pastor at Grace Resurrection Methodist Church.
And I'm James Williams, Senior Pastor.
And in this week's episode, we're continuing our conversation on mental health in the church, and we'll be addressing the question, what do I do when someone I love is struggling? So last episode, we talked to you, the individual, and this episode, we want to talk to you if you are caring for someone that might struggle with mental health disorder. So let's dive into this week's conversation. Just further context to frame this episode. Again, last episode we talked more about the individual, but now we want to talk about, I would say, a pair of shoes that more people find themselves in. This would be almost probably more relatable, is the role of caregiver for someone that's struggling with mental health. So here's the context. 1 in 4 Americans provide unpaid care for an adult with a health condition, including mental health. Caregiver burnout is recognized as a clinical phenomenon, and caregivers have significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety than the general population. And studies show that social isolation is one of the most harmful effects of caregiving. And so that's the issue. And so I guess the first question is, why is caregiving so difficult? I mean, you expressed in our last episode that you have been, in some capacity, a caregiver for people who struggle with mental health, or at least you've walked with caregivers. So why is that role
I think all pastors do.
Why is that role so difficult?
You know, the biggest thing is that we oftentimes know that we have to take care of people we love, and we take too much responsibility for it at times. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying you have to be really careful with it. A caregiver's world gets really small. That's the first thing I'll say.
Yeah.
They could have been active. They could have been out of the house a lot. They could have been very involved in lots of things. And once you become a caregiver to someone that is close to you, your world just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think that's what the danger is for the mental health of the caregiver, because they're focused totally on someone else's care, that they don't take care of themselves, and people assume that they're strong because they're doing this. I see a ministry opportunity so clearly in that. If I have dealt with one thing consistently over the years, it has been being in ministry to people who are caregivers, who have a spouse or a child or someone close to them, a parent, gets sick, and it takes up every minute, and it's stressful. It's so very stressful. And nowadays you can bring caregivers into your family to take care of things like that, but it's extremely expensive to do that. So most people do become caregivers. Now, I want to say though that there are cultures where family always takes care of people as they get sick and grow older.
Right.
That is not the culture in the West. We tend to put people in facilities, and we have people come in and take care of people. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. By no means am I saying that's bad. What I am saying is it really causes significant issues that we need to address. And we need to hold up the arms of people in our congregation who are caregivers. And that's what I've tried to do over the years. I've tried to be very in tune with that and say, hey, what can we do? Can we come over? Can I send somebody just to sit for a while so you can get out and go get a haircut or go to Publix, whatever? That's big. And it seems like such a small thing, but it's huge when you're taking care of somebody who's having a lot of problems.
Well, and I also think just the mental health toll that caregiving in general can take, and you and I can both speak from experience to this, but I think about my wife, who's a stay-at-home mom. She's a mom, right? But she's technically a caregiver for 2 small children.
For sure, yeah.
And what you just mentioned, one of the biggest gifts I can give to her is a night out on a weekly basis.
You're good at that, too.
Look, because I know that she is at home with 2 kids, a 1-year-old and an almost 3-year-old, for sometimes 10 hours a day by herself.
Yeah.
and she's not having an adult conversation. She's not, and she tells me all the time, the house, if she's there for too long, just starts to feel smaller and cramped.
Sure.
And it can, if she's not getting out regularly, again, even a trip to Publix on her own or something to differentiate, that it can really cause issues just
Yes.
with her and her taking care of herself and watching out for herself and just being, so again, last night she went out and played. Have you heard of Mahjong?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that is like all the craze right now amongst like 30-year-old women, or like
Yeah, I
millennial
saw a
and Gen
Mahjong
Z
table
women
on the internet the other night.
Yes, they're insanely expensive.
Yeah, it's like automatic. It
Oh,
was like $4,000 or $5,000.
yeah. Just the
Crazy.
set of
Yeah.
tiles is like $400 or $500.
Yeah.
So anyway, like she went out and played
So it's
Mahjong with
good
her
for your
friends.
brain.
Yeah,
Good for
she
your
played Mahjong with her friends, and I put both girls to bed. And that's not me saying, "Oh, look at me." That's just me saying that if you know a caregiver, sometimes one of the best gifts they can give you, like James said, or that you can give them, is a night out or a break. Yeah, like he said, hey, can I come sit at the house for a little bit so you can go grocery shopping or go do something for yourself?
Yes.
But if we're speaking to the caregiver, and I can think of several caregivers in our congregation, several spouses that are caregivers.
Yes.
What is the difference between helping and enabling, especially, because our caregivers that I'm thinking of, those are health issues. That's different. I think it's still important to address those. But when we're talking about mental health, what's the difference between helping someone and enabling them in their mental health issues as a caregiver?
Well, I think there's a fine line. And when you love someone, it's a really blurry line, because caregiving is, in my opinion, something that happens when the person can no longer do some certain things for themselves. And that's a true caregiving need. Then there are folks who sometimes can do some things themselves, but they've chosen not to do those things. And in some ways, you can take advantage of people in that way, because you know that they're going to, and there are certain personalities, I think, that are just like natural caregivers. They want to take care of people. They want to make sure everyone is okay. And that's where I think you have to be most careful, because those personalities truly put everyone in front of themselves. And I think to be a good caregiver, you need to be able to know the signs that you need a break, and that you need to say, even to the person that you're caregiving for, you can probably do this yourself. I'm here to help you with things you can't do, but you can do that yourself. We hate to say those things, though, especially when someone's struggling. But in fact, if we enable certain behaviors, that person just gets worse. It's not really helping them. So I think that's a big part of it. I think caregivers too, Taylor, really need to be in relationship with other caregivers. And there are support groups for that. And I think it's smart to get involved, because as you sit around a group of people and they talk about their experiences, you know that you're not alone and you're not the only one dealing with this. So I think that's also important. And the church probably needs to have more opportunities like that, where you pull people together and let them support each other. Because we'll start a grief group, and we think that's really important. It is important, but caregivers are experiencing their own type of grief, especially if there's this really good chance that the person will pass away because of what they're dealing with. I think we should be on the front end of that and not on the back end of it. And sometimes the church ends up being on the back end too often.
Yeah, and I think especially in terms of, the difference between helping and enabling, especially becomes true in terms of addiction and someone who struggles with substance abuse or any gambling, you name it. I think that is when that line becomes really important to acknowledge. In terms of kind of the next thing I want to go to is, when do you push someone to get professional help? So in our last episode, we acknowledged, hey, there are times where professional help is needed.
Yeah.
But as the person who's taking care of another individual who's struggling, when do you begin to to push them? And when do you recognize, maybe, again, I can think of situations right now where we're helping people through something like this and we're
Yes.
navigating that line. When do you tell them, hey, you need to back off because you're enabling? Or, I mean, that's such a hard conversation to have when you're not
Right.
intimately involved. So let's go there for a little bit.
Well, and more than anyone in this congregation knows, really, that you and I are dealing with some things right now in our congregation with some folks who are part of our family here. Most of the people in the church have no clue what we're dealing with or how much we're dealing with it right now. That's okay. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. We're walking with people. But I also think that it's very important for us to know the signs of the people that we're giving care to and to respond to those signs. For instance, I am addicted to my Apple News feed. I watch it. I mean, I read.
Thanks for
every
admitting
morning.
that.
Yeah. I need to probably get a 12-step program for that. But I scroll through my Apple feed every morning, and that's I don't watch TV news anymore. I don't remember the last time I watched news on television. So I get a lot of my news by reading and current events. I read an article last week about the signs of dementia. One of the early signs of dementia is a person will begin having financial problems that they have not had before. I thought I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
But these people have been really good with their finances, and they begin to get late notices. They begin to overdraft their bank accounts because they're spending lots of money because they don't either remember that they've spent it already on something, or they go into these kind of manic phases where they spend too much money on things, whereas they normally would not have done that. And there's a whole list of things that can point to dementia. But I thought that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's something that if you weren't close enough to the person and you saw that, you would think, well, their financial decisions aren't any of my business, and we wouldn't say anything about it. And I thought that's interesting that one of the first signs of dementia is the person will begin having financial issues. And so I think we need to educate ourselves on what those signs are so that we're making right decisions about people that we love. And I do believe that the church community can be really helpful in that way.
Yeah. And I think, so we've talked several times throughout these past 2 episodes about the importance of community. And that just seems to kind of be the underlying tone in a lot of this is be connected with your community. Also break the stigma with your community. So we have a great small groups culture here, and it's only growing, which is just really cool. Cause that's, I think, any spiritual practice aside from silence and solitude, obviously, has to be done in a community. Every single one.
Yes.
You're more generous in community. You serve better in community. You read scripture better in community. You pray better in community.
Absolutely.
All of these things. And I think you're cared for better in community.
That's one of the things when I stepped into this church, I was so thankful for, because Randy and Diane Michaeler, and many folks know Randy was a pastor at Mount Bethel for many years. They immediately, one of the first things they did when this church started was they started forming small groups and getting people into smaller settings because it's so very important.
Yeah.
And most churches do not understand the value of small groups. But you begin to do life together, and you're going to find out that people are struggling with these things, and you can be there.
Yeah.
And I've said this, you've heard me say this over the years. Real ministry happens in circles. It doesn't happen in rows.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I can preach great sermons, and we can have wonderful music on Sundays, and we can fill this church up like we do every week. But the true ministry, I believe, happens mainly in those small groups and people who are meeting together consistently. That can be a great source of support for people who are not only caregivers, but trying to decide whether or not they need to be caregiving.
Yeah, because I think breaking the stigma plus being intentional in community, I think, is the recipe for what we're addressing here.
Yes.
When to know, hey, I'm struggling with this. I've got a loved one who's struggling with this. What do I do? Because particularly when you said that caregiving makes their worlds get really small,
Yes.
I think bringing those vulnerabilities up in community helps it get a little bit bigger It helps to shed light on the situation. So
Sure.
as we wind it down, again, I always want to end with what can the church be doing to help? So what can the church, and you've mentioned this a little bit, but let's get really concrete. What can the church do to help caregivers and families who are supporting loved ones with mental health issues?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the first thing. If you see someone in the congregation that you know is struggling with a caregiving issue, ask them if they're okay and how can we help. 2 questions. Are you okay and how can we help?
Mm-hmm.
I just had that conversation this past week with someone who's involved in caregiving. The other thing is we need to really make sure that we live in and build into the culture here a ministry of what I call helps.
Mm-hmm.
There are people in every congregation who have the spiritual gift of service, serving, hospitality, really coming alongside people and walking with them in different ways. Find out who those people are and give them the charge to be on the lookout for those things. Because a lot of times, some personalities are never going to bring it up. They'll notice something, but they think, like I said about the finances, that's none of my business. And you just say, well, maybe I'll just pray for them. Well, that's good. You can certainly pray for them, but I think real ministry would be to say, how can we help you? Because we see this happening and we care about you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're setting up some opportunities. Like you said, you mentioned Grief Share. We're starting a Grief Share group in August. It's going to meet here for, I think it's like 10 weeks. And again, we're really big on groups doing ministry in circles. And I think that's the best way a church can help is create a culture where your people are not afraid to be known.
Absolutely.
By a group of people that they trust. And I think that ultimately will help dispel any stigma and give people proper boundaries so that we're not having this caregiver burnout issue.
Yeah, I think that a lot of spouses should look at their husband or wife and say, you know, our associate pastor gives his wife a night out, a fun night out periodically, and you should do that for me too. I think they really ought to do that. Take your example. Yeah, I think I'm going to say that to Natalie tonight, actually. You know, Taylor gives his spouse a night out. Maybe I should. I think Natalie say, well, when you give me one, I'll give you one.
Yeah, being an empty nester, I don't know. Maybe that's a different dynamic. I'm just, you're like, you should have a night out. Natalie's like, I'm just going to leave. Okay, I'll see you later. But, oh man, well, as we dial this down, we hope that this conversation's been meaningful to you, and we hope that you'll share it with others if you think it'd be meaningful to them. And as always, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and on our website at graceresurrection.org. And we'd love if you continue to join us each week as we release new episodes of the Grace and Truth podcast. But until next time, may the good Lord bless and keep you.
Until we meet again.